Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Kalayim, Pedig Dalit, Halacha Gimel, Halacha Dalit, and God willing, Halacha Hey. We are learning today Daf Mem Aleph. We left off on Daf Mem Aleph, Amid Aleph, all the way on top of the Amid, and we're going to conclude by giving the final, which will be also the fourth case of what were to happen if a foreign seed is planted in only one spot within 4 amas from a vineyard. And the question will be exactly how much of the vineyard becomes kalayim. And here again, when one has pictures, then these sugyas become extremely easy. The challenge is not that much in the svara, it's much in seeing and visualizing the metzias. Now, Mishnah Dalid will discuss the configuration of this minimal 5-vine vineyard Lebeis Hillel that we said has to have 2 rows, but here is where we're going to learn inside the Mishnah that the 2 rows must be configured shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zonav. Actually, we learned Rambam, and we're going to see how there was a big machlokes to shainim between, let's say, the Rash, whose opinion is followed here by the Marafulda and the others, versus the Rambam, as we'll speak out when we learn Mishnah Dalit. The Gemara is going to give us a very interesting source to the rule of Shtayim Keneged Shtayim and Ba'achatz Yoitze Zanov. And what we will have in the Gemara will be the following discussion regarding how do we measure the 4 amas. The 4 amas, we get it, is from the vineyard. But now that we established that Lebeis Hillel, the vineyard does not have to be 2 rows that have 3 vines, which would make them, let's say, a consistent, a symmetrical. You can have 2 and 2, and va'achatz yoyse zanav. So let me just say the words, and then we'll see this better when we learn the sugya inside. Shmuel holds that the 4 amas is measured from the trapezoidal configuration, which is the shtayim keneged shtayim va'achatz yoyse zanav, versus b'shem Rabbi Yechanan that you dafka have to measure it as a rectangular. You're gonna see this inside Gevaldik. God willing, we'll begin today also to learn the 5th Mishnah in this Perek, Halacha Hey, in which the Mishnah will examine whether the 2 rows must belong to the same person, and the Mishnah will say it actually does not need to belong to the same person, and still those 2 rows will combine together to form a kerem, a vineyard. Now, B'chlal, there's a rule. We have this in Bavli Bava Metzia Kuf Aleph and in other places, that if I, let's say, plant something in your property without your permission, if I plant something in your property, my seeds, my work, the growth belongs to the property owner. Eloma, the owner has to compensate, whether it is the shvach, whether it is the hoitzah. That's going to be a side din that we'll have to remember to understand the case of the Mishnah. And what we will conclude, what we will see in Halacha Hey, is that even though, for example, a road is a separator, when it comes to Kilei HaKerem, we will see that a road is not a separator, and many other stringencies in which we will see how Kilei HaKerem is going to be, on some level, more chamur than the dinim of Kilei Zeroyim. It's going to be a Gavaldik Adaf. We are on Daf Mem Aleph, Amid Aleph, again, all the way on top of the Amid. This is the 4th case, the final case. And if you can already put up Kevan, the pictures, whoever has Zoom, it's going to be extremely important. What I will say is that we're gonna learn this final case according to a girsa that we have all the way in the bottom, which will be diagram O when we get there. But let's first put up the most important is diagram L. Okay. Says, very good. Says the Gemara, what's going to happen? Actually, David Homami, after the class was over, mentioned this case. Zara keneged habinayim shebekeren hazavis. In the 3rd case, we learned about someone placing the foreign seed opposite 5E, mamash at the corner. Here, the Gemara is inquiring, and if you have to look at the picture, both X and Y is included in this 4th final case. What's the uniqueness over here? whenever you include more than the minimum kerem, we only do that because, like we were saying, if you can go to one direction and you can go to the other direction, and there's no basis to go in one more than the other, then you have to go both directions, even though you're going to end up including more than the minimum kerem. Here by X is a taka not within for amis, let's say, of 3e. It's not within for amis of 1e, doesn't matter. But it is within for amis of both 5e and 4e. So now if you want to know, Lebei Shammai, which row will it include? Not all 9. No, only the one milmata lamaila. Only E1, E2, E3, E4, E5. And the same thing if you planted the foreign seed where the Y sign is. Okay, but don't go there yet. So here again, I know that the Y seed is only within 4 amas of 5D and 5E. I know that. But when you have to add and make a row of Lebei Shammai, of one row of 5, it makes sense that you should only go in the direction of 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, 5E. Because Y is closer to the row 5 going from A to E versus to row E going from 1 to 5. Let's read it inside. And not like we had in the previous case, both E1, E2, E3, E4, 5, and 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D. No, only that direction. So X will go, let's say, milmata, milmailo lamata, top down. The Y is going to go from right left. Now, what I would like to do, dafke kevan dafke, is for you to put up. And listen, I spent some time yesterday, and I know that we have in our Gemara one printed girsa, but we're going to learn the Gemara today together based on the version whose picture is dafke diagram O. Go all the way to the bottom. Again, let's go to X. So the minimum we're saying is 5. The reason, again, why we had cases yesterday in which Lebei what became prohibited were 6, were 3 and 3, was because it was equal to go in one direction or equal to go in the other direction. But look inside the X and diagram O, and only be'achas yoytze zavan mikan. Now, it's going to, the first thing you do is that right away it prohibits 2 rows, 2 and 2. So if you're looking at diagram O, if the person planted the foreign seed where the X is, well, it's closest to 4E and 5E. That's what X is closest to. So those 2 become prohibited, and the 2 rows behind it will be 4D and 5D. Now you have to add 1. Now, guys, 3E is closer to the X than 5C. You see that? It's closer. So you only prohibit 5, and you know exactly where to place the tail. You place the tail closest to the foreign seed. Now, I'm going to read the next words in the Gemara, not shishis a zoihi. We're going to learn this Gemara that you dafka don't have 6, you only have 5. And indeed, there is a girsa that writes that the Gemara is asking chamishis a zoihi. Where do you place it? So it depends. You know, whether, because the Gemara's inquiry was either X or Y, as we showed before. So if shlishish sheberishoina or shniya shebashlishis, let me just decipher these words. The first row, just the third, the rishoina is the lowest row. The lowest row. The third in the lowest row is what we will call 5C. You see, C is the third. Now, it's if you put the foreign seed in Y, that's the first case of the Gemara. So the 4, we know what they are. Look in the picture of Y. What are the 4? The closest to the Y is 5D and 5E. 2. Then you automatically go to the 2 above it, right? That's Basilil. That's going to be 4D and 4E. Now you want to know where to put the tail. So you're going to put the tail on the shlishis shabarishoina. The Rishoina, the first line, what the art school called 5, the Gemara is calling the first, because it's the first line, the first row, closest to the foreign seed.
By tail, you mean the need to have 5.
The 5th, very good, Kevin, exactly. Yesterday we were learning that you ended up adding 6. You put 2 tails because there was no logic to go one side more than the other. But if your foreign seed is Y, of course there is a logic. The 2 options are either Shlishi Shabarishayna. Shlishi Shabarishayna is 5C. The other option is Shniya Shabashlishis. Shniya Shabashlishis. The second vine in the third row. The second vine I just want to get the words, the second vine in the third row. What are we talking about over here? I mean, I know we're talking about 3E. I take it back, guys. Shlishi Shabarishayna. Shlishi Shabarishayna is 3E. 3E.
And the first one in X.
I think so. Just get Shniya Shabashlishis. I just don't know. I have the chap over here. Which one is referring to which one? The first one. Yeah, in other words, it's either the configuration of X or the configuration of Y. You see the logic. I'm just trying to see how this fits into the words.
It seems like Shlishi Shabarishayna would refer to Y, no?
Shlishi Shabarishayna.
It would be the first one.
That's what I thought. No, I was saying
that. It be 5E.
Yeah, one second. I'm with you. One second. Okay. But tell me, what does Shniya Shabashlishis mean? Why Shniya? Because why is it Shniya? I would have written it the first of the Shlishis, right? Because right. In picture X, what we are adding is the first one. If the first one is the easternmost one, the first one is the one all the way to the right. The first one is what he calls E. And the third line, Milmata Lamayl, I get that. Should have been Rishayna Shabashlishis. That's the only thing that I'm wondering about. Guys, that's it. I have the resolution. Look in the bottom. Indeed, according to the girsa that we're learning, if the girsa is chamishis ezehi, okay, we said good, exactly. Shlishis, so then it's a different version. Shlishis shabarishayna is Y. Shlishis shabarishayna is 5C, and then the girsa and the gemara is rishayna shabashlishis, which is 3E. Okay, that's it. We said good. Either Y or X. And dafka, and in other words, the final case, Lebesilo, is dafka not 6, only 5. Chavra Atkan. Let's move on weiter. Now we're going into halacha Dalit. Says the Holy Mishnah. I know we already quoted this by heart, but if you can please put up the picture, Kevan, the picture to the left on 41A2. Says the Mishnah like this. This is all the Beisila. Right, a kedem is a minimum of 5. The minimum of 5 has to be divided into 2 rows, but not 4-1, 3-2. And more details, the 3-2 is not stam hefkervel 3-2. Haneteya, the way you have to configure the 2 rows of 3 and 2 is shtayim keneged shtayim. 2 have to be aligned with the 2. So if we're going to be looking at, very good. Guys, look at the picture according to the Rash, which, by the way, that's the halacha. I want you to know that we follow it, which is unusual because many times we follow like the Rambam, but in the Shulchan Aruch Paskins like the Rash, and that's going to change the whole way you learn the Mishnah. Shtayim keneged shtayim is, if you're looking at the left side of the left picture, so you look at the top row, there are 2. The top row only has 2. The bottom rows 2 are aligned with the top 2. And now, va'achatz yoytze zanav, and one goes out like a tail. According to the Rash, it continues to go in the same alignment of the bottom row, but you add another one, the way you see it in the picture. Just want to say that according to the Rambam, the achatz yoytze zanav is not on the row of the bottom one, not aligned with the row on the top one, but dafka in between, indeed like a tail. if you can make believe, there are 4 legs of an animal, and that the tail is in the middle. Anyways, that's the Rambam, just to quote it. And when we learn the Rambam, that's the way we learn Pshat. That's the minimum Kerem. And that's going to change the whole Gemara. I mean, everyone can learn the whole Sugya according to their opinion, but it's going to be too time-consuming to go through it l'Rash u'l'Rambam, and we're going to learn it like the Rash because v'chein halach.
Rabbi, Rambam is trying to make it equidistant from both rows.
Yes,
right?
dafka. And each one will hold that the other one's configuration is not a Kerem.
Who is the Rambam following?
The Rambam's understanding of the Mishnah. You have to know how to read the Mishnah. Amazing, huh? Okay, now, Haneze Kerem, guys, we're only reading according to the Rash. And now the Rash, Shtayim keneged Shtayim ba'achatz bintayim. The Rash says that the Mishnah is explicitly ruling out the Rambam. That if, now leave the bigger picture up, that if you have 2 opposite 2, and the other one is like the Rambam, that means it's in between, says the Mishnah, that's not a Kerem. Or another case, the other case, Kevan, go to the top picture of the very good. So the first one, this is according to the Rash, and everyone else, the Marafuld over here. But let's go over here. That if you have Shtayim Keneged Shtayim ba'achas b'ntayim, which will be the picture that's on the screen to the left, or listen to this: Shtayim Keneged Shtayim ba'achas bo'emtza, 2 against 2 and 1 in the middle. 1 in the middle is the picture. Is going to be the no, not that picture. Go down, Kevin. Very good. You see this? Very good. You see the X? You see that? So really, you have 3 rows. That's the va'achas bo'emsa. You have 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and the one in the middle is equidistant from all of them. It's mamish that's called be'emsa. No matter which one you're going to, it has the same distance. It has the same distance to the top right, the same distance to the top left, the bottom right, bottom left. Ain't no kerem, not a kerem. Again, the Mishnah repeats, and let's learn this the way that Rash learned it, the way we learned it, the way we'll continue to learn it. Atkan, the Holy Mishnah. Now, where do we get this from? Where do we get that this configuration is called a vineyard? So we're going to have a very interesting source. There's going to be pushback against it, but let's learn. We're learning Torah. Says the Gemara, Rabbi, Kevin, you got to turn the page and already get ready for the next picture, which will be extremely important. There's so many different ways of learning the Gemara, but we're going to the Gemara L'Rash. We said Rash is the Rishon that wrote a commentary on the Mishnah. The Rash is not the Rash Cyrillia. Okay. Rabbi Barba, in the name of Rabbi Bar Yosef, he's quoting a pasuk in Parshas Masei. Let me just tell you how that pasuk begins. That Zois ha'aretz asher tiper lochem benachla eretz kanan ligvul oisel. And if you read the context of this pasuk, the word ligvul oisel is superfluous. So Darshans Chazal eretz kanan ligvul oisel, meaning Gvulois shabadu lehem kenanim, that we should recognize the boundaries, guys, for cultivation, the boundaries for a vineyard as was contrived by the Canaanites themselves. Look inside the top Marafuldam. Means the Torah is giving credibility to the way the Canaanim, the way they configured vineyards. The way the Canaanim, they configured their vineyards. Exactly that should be the way Yidden Lahavdol will define halachically their vineyards. And we know that the Canaanites govlu beis keneged beis va'achas yotzes. If you remember, if I'm not mistaken, in Shabbos Pehei, I wish I looked it up. We have over there. Remember from the Amorites that they were the ones that, or from other nations before, that they were the ones that they would pick up earth. Remember that, Yakir? And they would smell it, and they would tell you, I'm making a mistake, another nation. It's before Matan Torah. It's before the Yidden became Yidden. And they would be able to tell you, what is this earth good for? In other words, there was a certain chachma regarding agriculture that other nations had. Turned out that the Canaanim knew how to make a vineyard. Now, what's the advantage of planting a vineyard versus individual vines? I don't know, but there's something about a vineyard. And they knew, they planted 2 shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yotzes zanav. And the Torah is saying that's the way you should keep a kerem. Now, to make the configuration, halachic configuration of a kerem based on the Knanim, the Gemara is not so happy with that. Ravimi boy, ulameidim in Aknanim. Should we learn anything from the Canaanites? Of course, we're not comparing one thing to the other. Now, the Rabbi Chia Barba, in the name of Rabbi Chia Bar Yosef, doesn't respond to Rav Imi's objection. But this is a very interesting back and forth over here. Okay, Atkan. No, it's completely, Rav Imi says, learn nothing from the Goyim. That's the halacha. The top, maraful, the 3 lines from the top. Okay, done. Now let's go. Now that you have a vineyard, Kevin, I need the top picture. What are we saying? That once you have a vineyard, it's not 6 tvachim. Now you got to keep a work area gap of 4 amas. How do you measure 4 amas? And we're going, guys, we're following the Rash. How do you measure 4 amas if the vineyard is not symmetrical? Let's just make it that the top row has 2 and the bottom row has 3. And the third one does not follow, it's not following the top 2, right? It protrudes, it's called the tail. Then you see the picture? So when you measure the 4 amas, from where do you measure it? Machlokes. Shmuel says that now that we established a kerem, so b'moedei luchsan. Luchsan means there's going to be a diagonal. In English, this type of image that you're looking at is called a trapezoidal. And I'm happy that the Gabbai is not here to correct my... Danny did it. Trapezoidal.
We don't say it's called, it's just a trapezoid.
Trapezoid, it's so Yiddish. Trap ahead, trapezoid, trap ahead. Very good, trapezoid. I love it. See, I didn't go on the Google pronunciation. I was afraid that the Gabbai would correct me, but Baruch Hashem, Dan correct. Trapezoid. What's a trapezoid? That's good. So if you take a look at the picture. In other words, you make a diagonal line from the bottom third to the top second. And now from that, you measure 4 amas perfect from all of the inner kerem. So what area will have to be cleared from foreign seed? Not a rectangular area, a loichsan area. There's going to be a diagonal. But that's a Shmuel. However, Rabbi Yossi Bar Zemina says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, no. Atroya ki'ilu acheres l'tuyakan. With the atroya, royan oisoy, and the Bavli means the top right, make believe that you made another vine there, even though you didn't. In other words, put an imaginary vine on top of the zanov, on the top row. Now you have a rectangular. From this, in a rectangular, measure 4 amas to all of the directions. So the prohibited work area that has to be left open without any foreign seed is going to be a symmetrical rectangular area. That's the machlekes between Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. Now, Zog the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan, boy, the question will be on Rabbi Yochanan's opinion that you're making a rectangular. Not a shtayim, keneged shtayim. Va'achas yoytze zonov. Va'achatz yoytze zonov. Right. And you made another shtayim keneged shtayim va'achas yoytze zonov. So, Kevin, if you can put, we got to move moving on. The top picture on the left of 41b2, you got to turn the Amid. So what we have over here, let me say the words in English, we have 2 overlapping vineyards. Guys, you have to see it. 2 overlapping. Look at the picture. So what you end up happening is you have 2 rows. The top row has 5 vines, A, B, C, D, E. The bottom row, very good. Now you see the picture. The second row only has 3 vines, B, C, and D. Why am I calling this 2 overlapping vineyards? Guys, if you can delete 1AB and 2B, what do you have? You have a vineyard because you have 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom. The Zanav is 1E. Now go to the other side of the thing, Kevin. You don't have to zoom out. And now, very good. Now you have the top row is going to be ABC, and the bottom row is going to be only BC. The tail is A1, 1A. Making that, guys, it's not 2 adjacent. The middle column is both part of the kedem to the right and part of the kedem to the left. That's called two overlapping vineyards.
Intersecting.
Huh?
Intersecting maybe, or
maybe the word is intersecting. I don't mind the word overlapping is not wrong.
Yeah.
So now the question is the concept of Rabbi Yochanan of Roy and Oisai came and zoom out. Let everyone see the whole thing. Do we say that Roy and Oisai would mean enough? Stop moving it. That you make an imaginary vine in 2A. You make another imaginary vine in 2E. And then from there, you go out 4 amas. So you're going to have a rectangular around a symmetrical rectangular kedem. Or we only make royan oisai, one. We only make one imaginary vine. We don't add 2. Now, if there would be 2 separated, there would not be an overlap. Of course, each one would have its own one imaginary vine from where you would measure the 4 amas. But since there is an overlap is a problem, because if you're going to put the zanaf, the imaginary, if you're going to fill in the tail on both sides, so then you can argue you're giving 2 imaginary vines. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan doesn't do that. Let's read the words inside. Kevin went a bissel crazy. If you look at the picture, he made a crown. I don't know what that. Maybe he was one of his kids. All right.
Well, I made 2 trapezoids, and then I included both circles.
Kevin, you don't have to defend yourself. Your mom love you, and we thank you. Are you going to put 2? Are you going to put 1, 2A and 2E? Or the Gemara doesn't know. Yerushalmi is big kids. Or no, perhaps only one imaginary vine per carrot. And since there is an overlap, if you're going to put A2 and E2, then you can say no. Then you're putting 2. That's question number 1. Now the pushback of the Gemara will not be here, because at the end of the day, in this case, you only have 2 rows. That will be very significant. Now look at the bottom case, the bottom picture, Kevin. You don't have to zoom in. That's enough. It's enough. The bottom case, you'll see over here. What you have is you have the top row. We're calling that row 1. You have ABC. The row 2 is ABC. That means you already have more than a kedem. But then you began a 3rd row, and the 3rd row's vine was planted in the middle in B. Here also, we can create this question of an overlapping vineyard just in the opposite direction. You can just imagine that. Because here also, you can say that the vineyard is comprised of, what did you do, Kevin? Of row B, 1, 2, 3. And the 2nd row is C, 1, 2. No, don't do that. Just put back the picture. Or, same, the overlap, the kedem to the left is B, 1, 2, 3, the middle 3, and A, 1, 2. In other words, here again, if you are going to look at this configuration as 2 vineyards that are overlapping one the other, each vineyard has a tail. The tail is B3. For the vineyard to the left, you can add this imaginary vine with Rabbi Yochanan from which to measure the rectangular 3A, and you can add for the vineyard to the left, so the vineyard to the right, B 1, 2, 3, and C 1, 2. Add another imaginary vine 3C from which to measure the rectangular for the daladamas. Here again too, so it's the same question, but we'll see it's not the same question. It similarly says the Gemara, not shalosh keneged shalosh. Here you have 3 rows. And the 3rd row is only mechuvenes keneged emsoyig, and all of this lerash. Everything we're learning it is according to the Rash. Here again, you can view this picture as two vineyards overlapping. Here again, do we say atroya the roya noisay ki'ilu acheres natuya kan la soisi kerem gadol on both sides, or again, since there is an overlap, even Rabbi Yochanan here perhaps is going to be a trapezoid on one side. I don't know on which side, but on one side, because you cannot do roya noisay twice on the same vineyard, and there's an overlap. Now, the Gemara is going to point out that even though Rabbi Yoinna's boy is open, but the second one, here the Gemara is going to perhaps not succeed, come with the resolution. And there's something, guys, that we learned above. I think it was on Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Beis. The Gemara says, no. The second question doesn't work. Loi chein at Omar. Didn't we not learn? And we learned this above. The Flamet Zayin ein zonav lekedem gadol. This is a very important rule. Now, a kedem gadol. Let me tell you the words that we said there, and how we're going to actually stay faithful to the words over here. A kedem katan is the minimum kedem, which is only 2 rows. Kedem gadol is 3 rows. Each one has 3 vines. 3, 3, 3. That's the kedem gadol. Now, what were to happen, guys? And here, Kevin, you can make a picture. If you have the picture that you see, don't add anything. The picture that you see, you have ABC, row 1, ABC, row 2, ABC. Kevin, put up the picture. Row 3. No, I don't want
Sorry.
that. I don't want that. Row 3, ABC. You have 3 rows of 3 vines, and then you put the tail DB. 4B. Row 4B. I want you to know it's amazing that from that 4B, you only have to distance 6 tfachim. Once you have a kedem gadol, if there is an additional protruding tail vine, it's not considered part of the vineyard. That is what we learned above. So now the Gemara is saying, hold on a second. Kevin, I just put up the picture. We just need this picture. That, what are you talking about? In the case that we are referring to, if you see the picture, good. If not, keep it in your mind. You have a kedem just by rows 1 and 2. You don't need more. Since you have a kedem just by rows 1 and 2, so then the 3B is like an individual vine. Like, what's even the question? You measure 4 ames rectangular from rows 1 and 2. And now, if there is an area coming off 3B that's outside the 4 ames of the vineyard, but it's within 6 tfachim of 3B, it's usher. And if it's beyond 6 tfachim of 3B, then it's mutter. Because of the rule, ein zonav lekedem gadol. So why are you asking whether you make 1 imaginary 3A or maybe 2 imaginary? You make no imaginaries because you have a vineyard just which runs in 2. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, I'm happy you're bringing this up. The rule that we mentioned, that ein zonav lekedem gadol, is only from 4B. Only from 4B. That means if you already have a kedem gadol is dafka 3 rows of 3, not imaginary, not halachic. If you have rows 1 ABC, 2 ABC, 3 ABC, now if you add row 4B, that's not considered part of the vineyard. B'shashu gadol, you add nothing. But if you don't have on row 3, what's the case that we're talking about in the picture? That on row 3 you only have 1. That's not called a kedem gadol. And yes, Rabbi Yochanan, 1 you for sure will add, not to have this diagonal, this trapezoid. So ma'olita in zon of lekedem kotum v'lasoisei gadol. That is the question. So indeed, the inquiry of Rabbi Yochanan is not only on the first case where you have 2 rows, it's even on the second case where you have 1 in the middle of the 3rd row, and this question remains unresolved. Mamish gavaldik. And I'm happy we have time. And now, for the next shtickle, we need no pictures. We are moving on now to the 5th halacha in the 4th chapter. Okay, so when you have 2 rows, you have a vineyard. Then, let me ask you, do the 2 rows have to belong to the same person? I mean, there's a big logic to say, of course. The Mishnah says it doesn't have to belong to 2. It's amazing. Even though the 2 rows do not, it doesn't matter who owns the 3, who owns the 2. In other words, it's a separate din. It's mine, it's yours. No one is allowed to plant within a vineyard a foreign seed. And if they planted there and it's left there for enough time that the vines grow 1/200 more or more, then it becomes kadosh. Says the Holy Mishnah. If someone planted 1 row of vines in property, in land that belongs to him, and the same person planted he planted vines on the neighbor's property. That case, that's why we quoted in the intro. And let me just repeat that in Bavli Bava Metzia, Daf Kuf Aleph, the Gemara teaches us a foundational rule. If I go to your property without your consent, I just go there. No. Not a sagas gavul means if I'm stealing your land. I'm doing the opposite. I'm planting good things in your property. I'm using it. Who does it belong to? The plant belongs to the landowner. The landowner will be chayiv some compensation. Then look over there to find out what. There is some, even though you can argue no compensation. Like that I ask you to do it, it doesn't work that way. But the halacha is that the product belongs to the landowner. So this will be just one example where the Mishnah is saying that 2 rows belong to 2 different people. The Mishnah could have written another case. I planted a row of vines in my property of 3. You planted one row of 2 in your property. Turns out that it's shtayim keneged shtayim ba'achas yoytze zanov. The same thing. In other words, what happens if you have 2 rows that do not belong to the same person? That's the case of the Mishnah. And now the Mishnah is adding more spice to it. Not only does it not belong to the same person, 2 rows, each one belonging to another person. Let's turn to Daf Mem Beis on the top. But in addition, there is a road, whether it's a private road, derech yachid, or a public road, derech rabim, that is in between the 2 roads. Guys, we learned before that when it comes to kilei zeroim, just a road is considered a separator. So if I have one species on one side of the road and another on the other side of the road, it's not a problem, b'chlal. They're separated by the road. Here, doesn't matter exactly. So here, not only the two rows not belong to the same person, but in addition, you got a path, you got a derech in between it. Or oder v'gader shu namach ma'asara tfachim, or if you have a wall that's lower than 10 tfachim. Now this is like we had by kilei zerayim, that any fence or wall that's not 10 tfachim is not considered a separator. But here you would think that even though the fence is not 10 tfachim tall, but don't forget the 2 rows belong to 2 different people. So maybe you're mitzaref a shvacha wall with the fact that it's different ownerships, maybe that will separate it. It says the Mishnah it doesn't. Yet, when they combine. Beautiful. However, if the wall is 10 tvachim or higher, then they do not combine, even if the 2 rows do belong to the same person. So holds the Tanna Kama. Now Rabbi Yehuda has the following chiddush. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im erson. Remember, we already quoted that word. So you have a kerem, which normally in the Mishnah will be referring to vines that were not trellised. So they end up growing and laying on the ground, versus a vineyard, which is what we are familiar with, in which you make for every vine some sort of structure over which you overhang the vines. Now, the picture that you have in your mind is something a little bit more sophisticated. The simpler way of having trellised vines is that they had a wall, and on the side of the wall, they planted the vines, and as they grew, they simply threw it over the wall. Now, the question will be, what would happen if you have a wall? So you have 2 rows, a row on one side of the wall, a row on the other. The wall is 10 tfachim. 10 tfachim is like 40 inches or a bit less. It's not that tall.
Growing on each side.
Oh, very good. And you have on each side. So we're saying that since the wall in between is 10 tfachim, they don't combine. But 1 second, what happens then if you take the vines of one side and you hang it over the wall, you take the vines from the other side and it's being overthrown on the same wall, and on top of the wall there is an intertwining of. Now will the wall separate them? Machlekes Tanoim. Rabbi Yehuda says that in Eresan Mil Ma'ila, that if the vines from both sides that were overlaid, that were put on top of the wall, are intertwined, now the wall is nothing. The wall becomes nullified. Yes, they do combine. Even though the wall is 10 tefachim to Allah. I just want to make it clear that that's Rabbi Yehuda, which means that the Tanna Kama argues with it. The Tanna Kama holds, look, that a wall that's 10 tefachim tall is such a separator that even when the vines from both sides that were laid over the wall, begashmias, they intertwine, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The wall is a separator. You don't have a halachic vineyard. Of course, you cannot plant a foreign seed within 6 tefachim. But you don't have a din of a kerem. Atkan the Mishnah, I think we should stop over here. I know it's like 2 minutes early, but
according to the second opinion, if you look from above, you don't see a wall.
Very
How
good.
come you? How come
According to
Yvol
the
says?
Tanakama. Okay, good kasha. I would answer to that it's not that we're saying, like we had in the previous chapter, Kevan, that whenever you have a wall as a separator, you can plant all the way up to the wall. We're not saying that. Even though the Tanakama, that the wall, Kevan, remains a separator, no one can plant within 6 tefachim. We're just saying that the wall affects a separation of the 2 rows, and therefore you don't have a vineyard. So therefore you don't have the din of Daladamas.
Go ahead, Rabbi.
To be continued.
Have a good day.